One. Michael?
Hey everyone, welcome to the Four Corners. This is the second video featuring Mazzy in Seattle, Michael, 45 RPM audiophile in Dusseldorf. I'm Michael in Austin, Texas, noted and archived. And our guest today is Michael Johnson, Poetry on Plastic, based in Phoenix, Arizona. If you missed the first video, look back to any of our channels. That was with Arvo Pärt, where we covered jazz. Today we'll be covering classical music, and Michael, Poetry on Plastic, was gracious enough to give us his time, and hopefully will shed some light on the world of classical vinyl. He is an oboist in the Tucson Symphony, based in Arizona, and check out his channel, which will be in the link below, for tons of overviews on classical vinyl and pressings and labels and all that goodness. So the format, we will each show one album, talk about it, and we'll kind of each chime in. I'll be talking about some of the musical aspects and the performance. Michael, 45 RPM audiophile, will be talking about the pressing, the collectability, how to find it, if you can find it, how much money it will cost. Mazzy will be talking about some of the design, photography aspects of the packaging and the visual optics, and then MJ, Michael Johnson, will be just chiming in with all the knowledge he has. But first, we kind of wanted to give a quick background on how we each got into classical music and classical vinyl in particular. MJ, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, what's interesting is that, despite being a classical musician and having been, playing classical music since I was, relatively young, a lot of how I got into vinyl and got into the audio community was through growing up in the punk and hardcore scene, actually. And so a lot of the first records I had were punk records, because what would happen is I'd go to shows, and eventually you get to a time where people stop selling CDs and the only physical medium people are selling is vinyl records. And that kind of got me interested and curious about the format. And it wasn't really till a couple years later that I started kind of connecting what I was training to do with, appreciation of vintage recordings of classical music on vinyl and all the different aspects of that kind of world. It took a lot longer to get into because of sound quality and pressings and things like that. It was a bit more complicated.
Great. And I got into classical music very late in my listening career, just a few years ago, and largely due to the VC, MJ, Michael, Poetry on Plastic, shedding light on a lot of the different pressings. Of course, I'm sure I share a sentiment with Dusseldorf, Michael, in the Analogue Productions living stereo represses and kind of the more audiophile represses from the last 10 years, from the classic era, from the 50s and such. But I'm still pretty green, so I'm excited to learn about this. And previously, digging in the bins in the record shops, you see there's so many variations of every piece of music from the classic core of the history of classical music. So there's a lot to learn about, especially if you want the best sounding pressing. And of course, each company or each conductor has their own slight variation on a work. So I'm excited to learn and share with you a few pieces from my collection. Mazzy, how did you get into?
Well, of course, how I get into every kind of music it's been the Beatle connection. And for me, classical music came out in 1965. The soundtrack to the movie Help had two major classical pieces in it. Had a clip of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, where Ringo and the tiger are down under in the basement, and the tiger's lulled by the Ninth Symphony. I fell in love with that symphony. Obviously, one of the most famous, iconic pieces used in movies, television. But to me, it is still a stunning piece. The Ode to Joy section of that, every time I hear it, is just so heroic. Also on that record is Wagner's Prelude to Lohengrin Act 3. And it's just so dramatic. Years later, when I worked in record stores, I referred to Wagner as sort of the Led Zeppelin of classical music. Now, MJ or anyone else might say differently, but just the the grandeur, even how his music is used in the film Apocalypse Now. So for me, it comes from a cultural stance. My first record, which I'll show a little later, 2001, was a major turning point. But a part where I really learned the most in 1973 was my first record store job when I was just barely 19 at Warehouse Records, a California music chain. And the strange thing about that record chain is their classical section wasn't just under Beethoven or the composer Solti or Bernstein or the conductor. Everything was listed by Schwann catalog number. If you know about the Schwann catalog, it was this monthly book that came out literally since the 40s or 50s, all the way through the 90s. And it was a monthly book that had mostly classical and soundtracks in it. And you'd go to the section and everything was listed. So that I learned about all these classical labels: Deutsche Grammophon, Angel Classics, Columbia Masterworks, Angel Records, which is a subsidiary of EMI, and then the budget labels, Seraphim, Non-Such Classics, and so on. So when a customer came in and wanted a Beethoven, you couldn't just go, or Beethoven's Ninth, you couldn't go to the Beethoven's Ninth. You had to look in the friggin' Swan catalog and learn it, and which number. It was the most frustrating thing. But the 2 years I worked there, I learned who composed what. Von Karajan was the Deutsche Grammophon person. Bernstein was all of Columbia. I got to know all the stuff, and in turn started getting some promos and got to know the music a little more, because I kind of, at least I had to talk about it. It was frustrating, but it was probably the best education I got at 19, 20 years old for classical music.
Great.
Michael?
Michael in Düsseldorf.
My turn. First, I want to know, Mazzy, you really look formal. Great outfit.
Well, I figured when you go to the opera, you go to the symphony, you dress up. You don't wear a friggin' bowling outfit or golf shirt. So,
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Once in a while, like we can't get dressed up and go out anymore for the time being. So, it's for the Michaels. I feel sort of ganged on. I got 3 Michaels and a Mazzy. They walk into a bar.
Really like it. Really like it. So how did I get into classical music? It started during my streaming period. I was very heavy into the ECM label. Probably you all know that, the jazz label. But ECM is not only jazz. ECM has a sub-label. It's called the New Series. And in this new series, they are all about classical music, modern, classical music. And that was my first time when I got in touch with classical music. And then, of course, when I started my audiophile career, I relatively quick learned about Living Stereo and the Everest editions. And those blew me away, and that even drags me deeper into that kind of music. And of course, there are also the early years, let's say the first 5 or 6 years of the Electric Recording Company. They also put out only classical editions, which was another edition. So that was the reason I am dragged into this classical music. So. But maybe now it's time to show the first record. What do you think?
Yeah, you guys go in the same order. So MJ, Phoenix, what do you have to share with us?
Okay, yeah, I had, well, of course, I had trouble picking 5 records because, why wouldn't I? And I kind of went the route of music and pieces and performances that really were important to me, rather than just showing, the rarest labels that I have with me here. But I picked one that you probably all know. This is the Analogue Productions reissue of Fritz Reiner and the Chicago Symphony, Scheherazade. This is probably my #1 recommendation whenever anyone asks me, like, oh, I'm trying to get into classical on vinyl, what should I get? I say, if you're not used to classical music, this is a great place to start. It's exciting, it's very tuneful, and the music has a flowing lyricism that very few people are going to dislike. And this record is important to me for a number of reasons. I mean, all of these old Chicago Symphony Fritz Reiner recordings, growing up in the classical community, the Chicago Symphony is really kind of held on a pedestal. Everyone talks about the Chicago Symphony with reverence, especially the big brass sound. Well, the sound and the level of the Chicago Symphony was really something that Fritz Reiner in his tenure established. He was the person that made the Chicago Symphony the Chicago Symphony, mostly through a reign of terror, from what I know. I remember hearing stories where, you know, he would just basically try to whittle out the bad players and get rid of them. You know, they'd be in a rehearsal and he'd, you know, go, oh, inside third stand, second violin, play measure 43 for me in front of the whole orchestra. And the orchestra got better. You know, say what you will, but the orchestra got better. You know, he wasn't the most, he didn't have the most intellectual interpretations of a lot of music, but he was a very competent conductor and a very competent music director. And the playing on this, especially on oboe, Ray Still, and all the woodwind features, and especially in the second movement, are just beautifully played. And this is a recording that, you know, even outside of the vinyl community and the classical collector community, this is a recording that my peers still, you know, reference and talk about.
What year was that recorded?
This is, I believe, 1960. Yeah, 1960.
It's funny because it reminds me, from a design point of view. Can you hold that up again? From a design point of view, that reminds me of the Cinerama films that came out in the early 60s. Hatari, How the West Was Won, has that big headline, those graphic typeface, and especially, like, that looks like a soundtrack. I know it's not, but it's got that, I mean, almost like a Hitchcockian title too.
You're right.
Topaz or something. Beautiful cover.
And
exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's a different typeface, but it's the same kind of treatment as that. In a way, you look like it could be the same thing. Of course, that's part of the RCA Living Stereo series too.
I don't know if I've ever heard an original Shaded Dog of this, because they do get a little pricey. That's why I think the $35 for the AP is really great. But I've also heard the double 45 of this now that is even better. If you don't mind getting up to change sides every single movement, the double 45 is mind-blowing.
Can you pronounce that slowly, the name of that again?
Scheherazade.
Oh, it's easy? Okay, just like it sounds, just like it looks.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a few pieces on that, a few movements in that piece of music are pretty, even if you've not heard them or you haven't thought you've heard them, you probably have, right?
Yeah, like the second movement, which is they pass the theme around, the storytelling theme, and then there's also the Festival of Baghdad. I mean, the symphony is basically a tone poem talking about, you know, Scheherazade and the Arabian Nights. If any of you have ever read the Arabian Nights stories, it's illustrative of stories from that.
And as far as the instrumentation, for those of us who are new to classical or don't know anything about classical, what is the typical number of instruments in a symphony for a piece something like this?
I mean, it's a normal, you know, late 19th century size orchestra. So, you know, we're talking probably like a 60, 70 person orchestra, maybe a little bit lower, maybe 55-ish, you know, in that range.
Depending on the budget.
Yeah, depending on the budget. Because I mean, the string section, you know, they don't write each, you know, it's not violin stand one, they don't write that in the part. It's just violin 1 and violin 2. And however many you want to add to the orchestra is the choice of the music director.
Awesome.
Great first choice. Great. Because that record was recommended by one of my subscribers. He wrote in the comment, Michael, you have to go into that Scheherazade. And I did, and it's outstanding. It's an outstanding recording in this living stereo. Gorgeous, gorgeous.
I'll go next. And this is a Latvian kind of contemporary composer, Arvo Pärt. I believe I'm saying that right.
Yes, you are.
Okay. And he's definitely on the more minimal side of composing, does a lot of sacred music, does a lot of work for choral stuff. This is Für Alina, which is one of his most famous pieces, with another song called Spiegel am Spiegel, which I believe means mirrors of mirror or mirror of mirrors. This was a repress from Mississippi Records, which is a shop and label in Portland, Oregon, which puts out a lot of old world and folk music. Somehow they got their hands on the recordings of this and got the rights. Beautiful, extremely sparse. One quote on the back here says, Arvo Pärt once said, "The instant and the eternity are struggling within us." So heavy themes. I'm going to put a link in the description to him talking about composing the piece Für Alina, but really gorgeous. This is a single LP, 33 RPM, but really nice foil stamping here and full color. Interesting painting here.
Looks sort of religious, that cover, that image from a distance. Looks a little religious. Are those meteor showers or rays of Jesus coming down? What's on the cover?
It's a painting by a woman named Sarah Culp. I don't know what it is, or I think, yeah, who knows? I mean, he has sort of some background in like sacred church music, some organ stuff, and a lot of choral work. So there is kind of that element, the spiritual element, I guess you could say. I don't think he's like overtly religious, but maybe someone can correct me.
A lot of those minimalist guys at the end of the 20th century always, you know, tried to take on some element of like spirituality or Zen. Like I know John Adams gets really into like Hinduism in his works, and you know Philip Glass and John Cage and all that. They were all into Buddhism and all that stuff.
He really exploded sort of in that scene, the late 90s, early 2000s. I remember picking up some CDs when Tower opened a separate classical store in San Francisco across from their Columbus and Bay store on ECM and on Nonsuch. And, you know, groups like, which I'm going to show later, Kronos Quartet, were doing a lot. He got a really kind of known even beyond the classical minimalist audience.
Yeah. I just mentioned the ECM new series, and Arvo Pärt is
right.
the main artist, one of the main artists in that ECM new series editions.
There was that one famous I forgot the name of the piece that was everywhere for a while.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've never played any of his music. I wish I have, but a lot of this minimalism doesn't lend itself to wind instruments very well. It's hard to play the same line over and over again on a wind instrument and not have the musicians get angry at you.
One thing funny, speaking of the minimalism, and he's talking about the score of Für Alina, which is the solo piano piece, is only 2 pages long. And it says the only notation related to the tempo roughly translates to peacefully in an elevated and introspective manner. So there's not really a time signature, just a peaceful tempo.
Okay.
I thought that was kind of funny. All right, Mazzy, what are you at?
Well, this is an extension of my intro, talking about pop culture and getting turned on to this album. When I was 13 and a half years old, my father took me downtown San Francisco, Cinerama, 70 millimeter, the first week it came out of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Now, first of all, this cover illustration, when you're 13 and a half, 14-year-old, and you're into the whole space thing, you just eat this up. You just look through every picture, but this movie opens and closes with the same piece of music with Richard Strauss's, and I'm going to screw this up, but also sprach Zarathustra. Help me.
Also sprach Zarathustra.
Thank you. Kind of a minimal tone poem, but it's one of those pieces of music that has become so iconic and parodied and overused. A little known fact, the version on this album is not the version used in the film until the CD came out, I guess in the 90s, where they got that version of it. But what's interesting about this, I'm thinking I'm 13, 14 years old, and I get turned on to this. Now, of course, one of the most overplayed, you know, lush pieces of music is the other Strauss, Johann Strauss, The Blue Danube. We've all heard it. It's lush. It's when the positive side of the movie and the space station, the rockets going to the space station, and it's almost like this whole 6-minute piece of music to that. My father, when I was in the theater, just loved that, because he's the one that would play things like Respigi's Pines of Rome and that very romantic type of music at home. It's only classical music he played. But then there's this György Ligeti two pieces of music in here, which is very sort of almost like progressive avant-garde, choral, psychedelic in a way. At the time, this is 1968, I'm listening to psychedelic music. I'm listening to Quicksilver Messenger Service, Jimi Hendrix play these 12-minute, 15-minute songs. And I hear Requiem for soprano, mezzo-soprano, mixed choir and orchestra, and Lux Eterna. Lux Eterna right now sounds, you know, before you had these Japanese anime type of thing, sounds like a character right out of that stuff. But the mood of those pieces, it's so minimal, it's so psychedelic. I would play this record in my room every night for months. Turn the lights out. Obviously, I was too young. I wasn't smoking pot or anything, but I had a black light. And this album to me was so psychedelic and turned me on to what would later become minimalism and avant-garde, which I'm going to show later too. So I really like the real melodic and the dramatic classical, like Beethoven or Wagner and stuff. But I really like Arvo Pärt and these other minimalists. I got turned on, and this record gave me a lasting impression on classical music. And I think I love the fact that obviously the movie did it. And of course, Kubrick, the little fact, Kubrick used this music when he was doing the rough cut of the album. He had a guy named Alex North score the movie. On the night of the premiere, Alex North thought his music was going to be in the film. He shows up. Can you imagine as a composer showing up at the premiere and your music is nowhere to be heard? He used all the music. Later, there was
Did he still get paid though?
Well, he got paid, but you know, obviously, you don't get paid for sales and performance and publishing royalties if your music. It's like a kill fee, pretty much. You know, for that. Can you imagine that? Now, we can't even imagine what this movie would be like with that. Although the Alex North score came out on CD, and I guess in the 90s or 2000s, so you can get that score. I can't imagine it without this, but it just made it. But this is like the found music he used for the motion picture.
You know, I heard a story once, I don't know how true it is, but I heard that Ligeti himself was not aware that his music was used in the film until years later.
He didn't like it, apparently.
Yeah, he was a bit startled. Ligeti's an interesting composer because, you know, you're comparing him to the minimalists, which is funny. But he comes before them. Right. And his music actually shares a lot in common with the type of music that was popular in the mid-20th century, which is more modernist, more serialist stuff. And he's, in some ways, his music is kind of the bridge between the really kind of intellectual, dissonant, atonal music and the more kind of ethereal stuff that would come later on with like Philip Glass and that kind of music.
Yeah, I think this was written in 60 or 62, that a couple of those pieces there originally. Yeah, I had no idea who he was. I mean, before this movie came out, before I heard the soundtrack.
So, my choice? I go back a few decades, but still one of the popular.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Four Seasons, Living Stereo Edition, 33 rounds per minute, well-known classical music. You know, I put this out a little on purpose because classical music is not so often in videos from the VC. There is Sound Strange who does some classical videos, but somehow it's not that popular. And not righteous, I hope it's the correct term I use, because it's almost sometimes like pop music. And in my little knowledge of classical music, I consider this one almost as the first pop music album. Maybe the musicians amongst us can say something about that, because it's so easy to get dragged into it. There also has been reworks from, help me out, Max Richter, thank you. Good one, great one. And this recording, I think has its roots up to in our times. It's still very popular, it's still out there.
Mike, mention the composer. We have a couple people who watch.
Oh, sorry, it's Vivaldi.
We have a couple people who have written in on some of these videos. It's hard to see,
yeah.
You know.
Okay.
Vivaldi, obviously, yeah.
It's interesting you picked that one because I mean, yes, but the Four Seasons is, I mean, it's almost to a point where like if you're a classical musician and you hear the Four Seasons, you just kind of roll your eyes because it's pop music at this point. It's so
Like Freebird.
yeah.
Rock and roll.
It's funny that you would pull out that recording though, because the way, and maybe you're aware of this, the way we played music from the 18th century at that time when that was recorded in the mid 20th century is totally different from the way we'd approach it now. So listening to like older recordings of like Baroque music, like Vivaldi, from that time period, from like the living stereo era, it's to a modern musician, it sounds really dated because the performance practice and the scholarship of what we know how to play that music is totally different now. Like I haven't heard that particular recording, but I would guess it's quite kind of heavy and big ensemble, and the tempos are a little slower, right?
What period is that recorded? Is that 1700s, 1800s?
Yeah, Vivaldi was in the mid 1700s,
Okay.
or no, early 1700s. Sorry.
Recording is from 1960, and that's absolutely true. If you hear this version, you already feel, you don't have to know much about classical music. If you hear that, it sounds great, it's beautiful, it's perfection. But nowadays you won't hear it that way, which is not always better. You know, if I hear Lang Lang and it's all about speed, I'm not so happy with that direction. They go faster in a way.
Isn't like 59 to 60 to maybe 65, 66 the golden age of those RCA records when they were put out like that? Kind of like, again, like Cinerama. That was the age of Cinerama. So
it's just because it happened to be, I mean, it was new ground in recording.
Right.
They
And
really
stereo
didn't
was
know
just
what they're doing. I mean, they did, but it was all new. But they were using, you know, pretty much all tube electronics. So it had its own warmth to it. They were using, you know, tube powered microphones. The miking was very minimal, and they were basically recording hall sound. And that's why these recordings from this era sound so natural, especially the string tone. It's a realism that you just don't get with a recording that has, you know, 80 microphones over the orchestra, and, you know, the clarinet solos coming, so you turn up the clarinet. And but actually, Michael,
that is the golden area of the classical recordings, the mid 50s to the late 60s, the best it gets.
I believe that version is the Società Corelli, which is an Italian ensemble. Is that? I think that's right. Yeah. I actually have. That's the only version. I have the same version. That's the only one I have of that.
Don't shoot me, but I can't say it right now. Can't answer that question.
Now, I know there's a recent vinyl release of a really excellent recording by the Interpreti Venezia, I believe, on the Chasing the Dragon records. It's I believe it's direct to disc. It's a direct to disc of this Italian chamber orchestra playing, I believe, yeah, it is the Vivaldi Four Seasons. There's two records out. There's a record of them playing assorted chamber music and then a record of them playing the Four Seasons. And the sound quality is excellent, but also the performance, if you listen to it, it's going to be very different from something like that. The playing is, this ensemble's smaller. The playing is more like a historically informed kind of playing, so it's much lighter. All the articulation is much lighter. I think they're playing probably on gut strings. So it's closer to actually what it would have sounded like in Vivaldi's time than
so having
the 60s recording.
Gut strings has like a softer, darker timbre to the tonal quality of the strings.
Yeah, because in the last 50 years or so, there's been a resurgence in not only the popularity of what we call early music, but also you know, scholarship on, you know, what is historically accurate. Because the thing about this music is, unlike romantic music from the 19th century, that orchestras have been playing since it was premiered. It is a continuous line. But some of this other music, like the music of Bach and the music of Vivaldi and all these Baroque composers, their music was premiered and then essentially shelved. And, you know, some composers found some Bach manuscripts and were interested in it, but this music has no continuous performance history.
Hmm.
So a lot of learning how to play this type of music is actual, there's actual fields of scholarship on it. And that's why you see people now interested in reproductions of instruments from those era and playing the music on the type of instruments that they would have been playing back in the 17 or 1600s.
I remember that, again, working in the 70s and Warehouse Records, there was all these series, and what was it, Archive, ARC,
Yep.
the Russian or whatever.
It was Deutsche Grammophone's early music label.
And it was great because I used to get some of those. The horror of my music collection is in the mid 90s when I purged a third of my vinyl, is I got rid of almost all my classical because CDs better for classical and in theory, and things aren't cut. You can have longer things. There's no clicks with the soft sections. But I had a lot of these records recorded on period instruments of the time, and those were just so beautiful. They almost seem more acoustic in a way.
Well, because they're recording it in smaller spaces, because this music was not meant to be played in big halls. It was meant to be played in smaller spaces. So a lot of the recordings are very open and acoustic, and they're recorded in old churches.
It's very intimate. Like
yeah.
It's
the good label, the good label for that kind of stuff, the really groundbreaking label that pushed a lot of these early recordings out was Telefunken. Das Audiophile. They did a series, especially the stuff they did with Harnoncourt, the conductor. It was some of the first recordings ever done on period instruments. It was like rock and roll. These people had spent like 4 months learning how to play the Baroque oboe and the Baroque flute, and then they said, okay, we're going to record all the Bach cantatas now.
Yeah, and what we also don't have to forget, there is always some duke or baron or high person who paid the composer for his entertainment. And when they did the first playing of this work, the guy sits amongst the musicians. They were around him, and that's the original way they were intended to be played, to be heard from the composer. Nobody thinks about that nowadays. We are used to there are the musicians and we sit here. It was not in the beginning. It was different.
Great.
Are you ready for round 2, second album, MJ?
Okay, sure. Let's see. What should I pick next? I'm going to continue with picking things that are personally important to me. And this is going to be a surprise for some of you expecting me to pull out something with, stellar sound quality. This is not amazing sound quality, but this is a recording from the 80s on Decca Digital of Charles Dutoit and the Orchestra Symphony Montreal playing some Ravel works, notably the entire Mother Goose Ballet, Pavane for a Dead Princess, and probably the biggest oboe piece in the orchestra repertoire, the Tombeau de Couperin, which means the Tomb of Couperin. This is some of my favorite orchestral music that exists. Ravel was a brilliant orchestrator. Probably in terms of getting colors out of the orchestra, Ravel might have been the best orchestrator who ever lived. And these are some of his shorter pieces. And this recording, the playing level on this recording is probably the definitive versions of a lot of these pieces. I know Le Tombeau de Couperin, which is a notoriously difficult oboe piece. The oboe is featured throughout. It's probably the fastest and the cleanest rendition of this piece that exists today. All the soloists on this, my former teacher, Ted Baskin in the Montreal Symphony, he plays solo oboe on this record. Another teacher I worked with at McGill, John Zerbel, plays solo horn on Pavane for a Dead Princess. And, despite the fact that I paid $3 for this and it's on kind of early, harsh digital, this is a record I just keep coming back to because the performance is so good.
Were you turned on to that piece or that specific album from those professors in Montreal?
I had heard of it before because I mostly from hearing about people. Look, every oboist studies Le Tombeau de Couperin. It's an orchestral excerpt. You go to any orchestral audition, you're playing Le Tombeau de Couperin. It's usually the first thing you play. So it's one of those things where every oboist is on their iTunes is going to have like 5 different recordings of it on there. And this is the fast one. This is the fast recording. You say you want to hear someone playing this at the marked tempo cleanly. It's this recording.
How much faster is it from other versions?
Quite a bit faster. Because I mean, the piece, the Tambour de Couperin, is an interesting piece because it was originally a piano. Ravel did this a lot. He would write something for piano and make a piano piece, and then later he would orchestrate it. So it was originally a piano piece, and the name is The Tomb of Couperin, the Tambour de Couperin, and it's kind of it's a nod to that old French Baroque style of Couperin in the court of Louis XIV. What's interesting about this piece, though, is that each movement is based on a French dance. So there's the prelude, the forlan, the rigadoon, and each movement he named after a friend who died in World War I. Each movement is, well, it's not named after, it's dedicated to. So each movement under the title of the French dance has a dedication to one of his friends who died in the war.
So the performance makes it worth having.
Yeah, and the sound quality is, I mean, it's early digital. It's not, it's not Telarc quality. It's Decca digital. But
it's very metallic sounding.
They avoided that actually because they recorded it in a suburb of Montreal in a very well-known church that's well-known for acoustic warmth. So they recorded it in a very warm space. They didn't record it in the hall. And so actually it's not a bright recording. It is a little on the analytical side. But in terms of like tonal balance, it's not painful to listen to.
Now, it's not my part of expertise. It's more Michael's from Germany, but have you heard a CD version of that?
I've heard a streaming digital version of it. I don't think I have the CD quality.
There's a whole argument is the vinyl adds a little extra warmth to it.
It does. Yeah. Now, I'm sure this, though, has been remastered, and I haven't heard a remastered version of it. But funny enough, this copy I have, I bought it in Montreal, and I bought it at I think a street sale, and it was the old broadcast copy for the Radio Quebec.
Oh, wow.
And so this is the broadcast card from all the times it was played on the provincial radio.
Wow, that's great. Nice little relic.
Yeah. I like finding stuff inside of records.
It's the best.
Michael, Austin.
Next for me, this is a 70s piece of music from the Polish composer Henryk Górecki, I guess is how you say it. This is Symphony Number 3, which I believe is also called the Symphony of Sorrowful Songs. And this is recorded in, I don't know how to say it, Katowice, Poland, in the 76, I believe. And it's a symphony in 3 movements, and it has some opera featuring the soprano voice of Dawn Upshaw. So I play music in an ensemble called Balmarais, sort of like instrumental post-rock, you could say. And we did one tour with the Japanese band Mono, who's like this kind of loud band.
I know Mono.
Yeah, Mono's great. We actually played with them on a West Coast tour, so we played in Phoenix with them. But funnily enough, so every night they would put this on as the house music. So when the doors opened and people were coming in, this was like blasting through the PA and setting up the mood for this kind of like very dark, epic music. But that's where I first heard that, was from the Japanese band Mono. And this was put out by Nonesuch in 2015. It's not like audiophile by any means, but it sounds nice, and it's kind of a totem for me from like this old touring cycle we did. But this is a nice one. If you
I'm not familiar with the composer at all. I do know who Dawn Upshaw is, but
yeah, I don't really know much about him either. This is the only thing I've really heard. He was born in 1933 and died about 10 years ago. So this came out posthumously.
I have that record on compact disc, and I got into this whole mode thing in the late 90s through the 2000s, and I bought tons of Nonesuch before they started re-signing these elderly statesmen like Randy Newman, Laurie Anderson, Ry Cooder on the Nonesuch label. Of course, it had been a budget classical label subsidiary of Elektra Records, and some sort of field recordings of international music back in the, the 70s and everything, in the 60s. But they did a lot of avant-garde music, a lot of 20th century music, like obviously like John Adams, Nixon in China, the whole that whole thing, and people like obviously Scott Johnson and even Zorn. What's his name?
John Zorn.
John Zorn. I really would buy these records because of the covers too. The covers were very modern, very unlike classical record covers at the time. Use of a lot of great minimalist photography, a lot of full bleed type things. And I just love, to me, that's a very wonderful graphic cover. I love that.
It's kind of somber music.
Yeah.
Not very upbeat, but has like this beautiful warmth, very lush, wintry kind of feeling.
Yes, yeah. Nice.
All right, Mazzy.
Okay, I'm going with, to me, who I think is, again, from my point of view and my knowledge, one of the most innovative 20th century composers, Russian composer. So Maslov does Russian, and I'm going with Igor Stravinsky. I just love this cover, him at
It's a great
1960. This is his recording, one of his recordings, one of the versions that he conducted. I'm going to say the English version, To Ride a Spring, and someone say it in French for me. Or the.
I think I can pronounce it right.
Yeah, totally. In fact, this is from 1913. This was originally recorded. The whole idea, it was presented on the Champs-Élysées originally when it was a ballet and orchestral piece. And there was almost like a mini riot, supposedly. And there's all these different discussions and theories. Were they rioting because of the music, or was it because of the ballet, or is it because of the theme of the pagan theme of the ballet? Stravinsky stuff is very, almost like, I guess, early modern avant-garde, very rhythmic. He uses sort of Russian folk music influences in this, and it was really a totally different piece of the time. And I didn't get into it until, again, I first heard this in the 70s. Someone put it on in the store, and it was a little different than all the traditional stuff again. And I just thought it was great. I love this cover. I think it's very graphic. There's a great CD that they put out, version of this on its 100th anniversary in 2013, Columbia Masterworks. I think it adds 2 different versions of him conducting this. So it's not just this LP, it's one other one, as well as a version of his Firebird Suite. But I just think he's an important artist. Again, that led me, I went backwards, but got into the avant-garde a little bit and out there music, which I really prefer quite a bit. A little challenging maybe, but I played it again yesterday and it just doesn't seem very odd to me anymore at all, but I think it's beautiful. Great cover. Look at that picture of him.
It's Stravinsky was always at the fort, always at the cutting edge. I mean, when this premiered in 1913, and in a lot of ways, it was the ushering in of the modernist era, both in terms of society and art. I mean, it was right on the cusp of World War I, and that's really when art and music were never the same again. It's funny that you pulled out that recording because I don't know a single classical musician that likes that recording.
That's why I'm not a classical musician.
Because Stravinsky was a brilliant composer, and
the majority.
And I mean, really, like all his music is just. I think he's a genius. But he was a terrible conductor.
And he didn't like a lot of the other people doing his work either, apparently.
I think but I think I remember reading an interview where even Stravinsky acknowledged that his own recordings were kind of garbage. Because it was funny is the orchestra is playing very well for him because it's the composer. But he can't keep the orchestra together at times. For this piece, I really like.
That's punk.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the point of a spring, though, is you need someone giving the right beats at the podium because the entire work is counting. There's nothing that technically. I've played it. There's nothing that technically difficult in the piece. It's just can you count? Can you count the polyrhythms?
It's very rhythmic. It's very rhythmic. Maybe that's why rock and roll people kind of gravitate to it because it's got those rhythms in a way. Who knows? I don't know. Michael, what do you think? Michael, who's answering. Austin, musically, do you know?
I'm familiar with that music.
Check it out.
Well, I of course I only know the Rites of Spring, which is coined the very first emo band, which was Guy Picciotto from Fugazi.
I love the Rites of Spring.
Yeah. But
I wonder where they got that name.
Yeah. I'm curious for the Rite of Spring, this piece of music. I wonder, are there other versions, MJ, that you know are like more like definitive or widely known?
Well, it's one of the most recorded pieces of music in the repertoire. I mean, there's so many recordings of it, and a lot of them are very, very good. I don't have it here. There's two that I really like. So most of the same players that are on that Stravinsky version, because the Columbia Symphony was more or less I believe that was recorded in New York. So
the label, it's like the House Symphony in a way, right?
But there's two Columbia Symphonies, really. Oh. One of which is contract people from the New York Phil, and one of which is contract people from the Los Angeles Symphony. Depends where they were recording it, because the ones with Bruno Walter in the Columbia Symphony were done in LA, but I think the Stravinsky ones were done in New York. But there's a great version of, I think, the same people, the New York Philharmonic, playing it with Bernstein on the early Columbia label. That's been reissued.
That would have been New York recording also at Sony or at
yeah. So Leonard Bernstein, the New York Phil, and I believe that was reissued by Impex, and I have the Impex reissue. It sounds better than the original.
That's probably mid-60s, early to mid-60s?
Early 60s. Yeah. And then another really great one, especially for sound quality, is the Georg Schulte in Chicago one on Decca in the 70s. And there's a speaker's corner version, and the original version is affordable, like $20.
I think maybe this is way off base from a musician's point of view, but Bernstein, his score, one of my favorite scores of his is his score for West Side Story. And there's a lot of influences of that type of, the jagged part of it, the different rhythms that he uses.
Yeah, he makes it count.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the whole dance thing too with Jerome Robbins and all that. So I'm a huge West Side Story fan. I know that's going from classical music to the Broadway, but
it's basically classical.
Yeah, well, especially, and that to me is the best use of it, the best collaborative.
And Michael, you in Germany, you have a version of this as well on vinyl.
Yeah, I have an Everest version, the 45 round per minute analog Everest version, and the sound quality is astonishing good.
Is that the one with Goossens conducting?
Yeah, the green one, beautiful cover.
Yeah.
Is it in your vault?
Pardon?
Is it in your vault, or do you have it handy? You don't have it handy.
I have it handy, Mazzy. I have it handy. Give me a second.
Oh, I didn't. We have a running joke about a couple of records that are very rare that he keeps in his vault. And I remember we did our first collaboration. I said, "You got a friggin' vault?" Oh yeah, you showed that. I love that. Beautiful cover.
Beautiful cover. Yeah.
Is that still available?
It is available, but easy. You can get it over a 55
acoustic sounds. Yeah, they have a double 45 of it.
Okay.
Beautiful version to go.
What's your next one, Michael Ludwig?
No, I have another one. Yeah, when it comes to availability, Electric Recording Company.
Yeah.
Schubert. I can't read it.
Sonatina number 3 in G minor, played by Johanna Mazzy and Jean Antonietti. And I put this one out because this is a good example to talk about the collectibility of classical records, of original pressings. If you consider some of those Blue Note originals pricey or expensive, look for some of the classical original pressing. Sometimes it's unbelievable.
It's always chamber music too.
Yeah, you're right. And they go around 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 euros is not that rare. It's unbelievable if you can get them.
For a few, yeah.
Yeah, for a few, of course, not they are not legion in that price range, but they are. For example, originals of this one. It's so hard to get. And also the problem again, those are old recordings. If you buy an original pressing, it's 50 years old and doesn't sound that hot, I think. So again, in my opinion, Electric Recording Company did a great job with this one, because this sounds fantastic. Fantastic. Everybody says it's insane to put out a record which goes for 300 British pounds initially, but compare it to an original pressing and then it looks a little different.
And those are made in London?
Those are made in London, yeah.
I still have never heard one. I want to.
We need to have a listening party if COVID ever ends.
Through the internet, you know. But Mazzy, what do you think about those cover art?
Well, we were talking when you showed the Sam records, what I got attracted to it. It almost looks like it. I know it's different. It almost looks like it's silk screened, but I don't think that is.
No.
Yeah, I like it. You know, it fits a certain type of music. Was the original cover like that, I assume?
Exactly. It's an exact reproduction of the original cover.
It's a very scholarly cover. It's you know, with a little sort of filigree thing of that. You know, I keep thinking of a graduation tie. It's not that, but a little thing on the end. You know, I love the EMI logo. I've loved that. You know, from the UK point of view, that world logo. It's very a timeless logo from the 50s and 60s for EMI records. I mean, when I went to London with the whole Beatle time and that is a whole old EMI Parlophone stuff. I just love that. I mean, in fact, Parlophone came from the classical side. We were talking earlier before we got on here, MJ playing the oboe, and I was telling him that, you know, George Martin, my Beatle connection again, was an oboe player. That was his sort of primary instrument. But that comes from the whole EMI house and the corporate thing of London and aside from the BBC. It's a great classic cover. It's not like great design, but it's a cover of its time. And right. I think it's great they didn't try to modernize it. You know, the worst thing to do is when they tried to, especially in the 80s, when they tried to do this 80s style thing of records later, it was, to me, atrocious, garbage. That's beautiful.
I have a question for our musicians. We have two musicians today. When I hear this Schubert records, it feels so modern. It doesn't feel like old music. Is that a personal thing, or is there some points when I say it sounds modern to me? It doesn't sound old.
I have no clue. So this is a duet, and there's two other issues of also Schubert music in this from the label. Interesting. I'm not familiar with the music on that pressing.
Yeah, I don't know those pieces. I know there's a ton of Schubert chamber music, and the string players kind of have free reign on that music. It's their bread and butter. I mean, especially like chamber music. What was going on in Germany at this time? This music was being composed against the backdrop of kind of the social upheavals of like the 1830s and the 1840s, and then we have the Spring of Nations in 1848. So both Schumann and Schubert were kind of writing during this kind of intellectual renaissance that was putting forth all these liberal ideals. And the problem is the government, especially in the local governments in Germany at that time, were they censored a lot of art and music at that time. So even though we have these symphonies from Schubert and Schumann, the really interesting music at that time is the chamber music that they were playing in salons. These upper middle class or bourgeoisie people in these communities would just have private concerts in their homes for each other, because there was what could be played in the concert hall at that time was very conservative.
So it's avant-garde music of their time.
Of their time, yes.
Wow, great. This is a history lesson, folks. We're learning.
Yeah. Yes, there's going to be a test on this video after. So,
what is your third record you want to share with us, Michael in Phoenix? What's your third?
Okay. So let's see, what should I pick? Let's do an opera record. Let's have more history. So opera seems to be the most under-collected thing in classical music. Like, people are giving opera records away. And I tend not to collect full sets of an opera. Like, I can't sit down and just listen to an entire opera. That's not, it's too, if you're not watching it, it's just too long and it's too much. But I love opera highlight records. And my favorite opera highlight record is one of the best performances. And this actually, the full version of this is on the Harry Pearson TAS list. This is Herbert von Karajan conducting Mussorgsky's Boris Godunov. Do any of you know this opera?
I do.
Oh, okay.
I saw it in San Francisco Opera.
Do you know which version you saw?
The San Francisco Opera doing it, but I don't know which version. There was a period of time where I got free opera tickets, and the San Francisco Opera is amazing. The staging, everything. It's you know, again, like you, I know the highlights of certain things, everything from Wagner to the Italian operas, the German operas, and but going for the spectacle, you know, where I was way up in the nosebleed seats of the Opera House, but I don't know which version, but it's stupendous. You know, it is like 4 hours, 5 hours.
Yeah, depending on the version. Yeah, I actually did a paper in my undergrad on this opera, and what's interesting is, so you guys know Mussorgsky probably vaguely, right? He wrote, you know, Pictures at an Exhibition, and he was the first.
I think he played with Emerson, Lake and Palmer too, or something.
He was the first real Russian composer in the 19th century. But when I say that, I don't mean that there weren't Russian composers beforehand, but they were kind of, the Russian aristocracy was very much trying to be Europe at the time. And they were very disconnected from the rest of the Russian populace and like Russian folk traditions, because the monarchs in Russia, I mean, Catherine the Great was German. Like, all these monarchs were not Russian. And so a lot of the music they were playing was imitations of the German and Italian styles that were importing over. And Mussorgsky was one of the first people to really compose in a Russian style and develop a really Russian school of music. He was also a raging alcoholic, and that's why most of the music we have from him is unfinished. He just couldn't get away from the vodka. This opera is his only finished opera. He left a couple other unfinished ones. It's the only one that was completed. It was revised twice due to censorship from the Tsar. And after that, Rimsky-Korsakov, who wrote Scheherazade, revised a new version of it that's kind of takes away some of the Russianness, in my opinion. And that's the version that was played for most of the 20th century, is the Rimsky-Korsakov version. And this is the Rimsky-Korsakov version. Nowadays, if it's performed, they almost all go back and do the original Mussorgsky version because it sounds more like Mussorgsky. But
makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, this is probably the best recording of the Rimsky-Korsakov version. Shostakovich also did a version too, but that one never got popular.
Is that an illustration or a photograph? Can you hold it close?
It's a painting. And so the opera Boris Godunov is a history opera. It's based on an actual Tsar named Boris Godunov, who usurped the Russian throne by murdering the young toddler Tsar-to-be, and then was himself murdered in a coup by a pretender.
What a beautiful
so he's kind of a controversial figure, especially when this was composed when the Tsars were still in power. It was seen as kind of a controversial move to write a Tsar as a villain.
This is the Mussorgsky Pictures at an Exhibition.
Which Mussorgsky never orchestrated. He only wrote the piano version. That version is orchestrated by the best orchestrator, Ravel.
But the cover of this opera was outstanding. I love
the
cover. Yeah.
It's an actual, I believe it's an actual old painting of the Boris Godunov, who was a real, you can go on Wikipedia and look him up. He was a real guy.
That's wild. I'm going to bring it back to North America for a moment. We're going to Toronto, Ontario. Glenn Gould, pianist. This is the complete Bach keyboard concertos. I found out about Glenn Gould. Again, I'm very new to classical music and classical pressings, but this is a book that I picked up called Conversations Absolutely on Music, Murakami talking to the conductor Seiji Ozawa. And essentially what it is a series of conversations of them putting on a piece of music, a record, either that Ozawa conducted or someone else, and they just talk about the different versions. And so as I was reading it, I would just on my Spotify, sitting in front of my stereo, and I would pull up whatever they were talking about and listen to it while I was reading them talking about it. So I learned a lot about music. This is actually really fun. Even if I didn't know anything about classical music at the time in terms of, but
I have to read that. I have never read that.
It's super fun. It's real quick, but it's kind of, I think it's over 3 or 4 conversations. But they talk about Glenn Gould at some point. So I've started listening to it and really liked it. And if you're familiar, I read a little bit about him. He's kind of a bizarre dude. From Toronto, he had extremely poor posture. He was always kind of stooped over the keyboard. This is the Speaker's Corner 3 LP box set of all the Bach stuff he did.
I have that one. It's great.
It's wonderful. But for those who are into the piano world, this might be up your alley as a good start.
I think Glenn Gould, I might be wrong, but I think he was somewhere on the autism spectrum. He was a very odd person, and in a lot of his recordings, especially, he has 2 really famous. He recorded the Goldberg Variations twice, and that's what he's most famous for. He had the early one, which I prefer, and then the later one. And the later one, he would do this thing where he'd play and he'd like sing and talk while he's playing, and so you can hear that on the recording. You can hear him kind of mumbling to himself while he's playing the Goldberg Variations.
Yep, and I know for those back to the ECM stuff, and Keith Jarrett also kind of did that kind of mumbling, getting into the music that he's kind of like making auditory noises.
Cone concerts, yes.
What he's playing.
I highly recommend, for those of you who want a little entertainment while you listen to your Glenn Gould, 32 short films about Glenn Gould is a fantastic film. It's about a 90-minute, hour and 45-minute film of these literally short, 32 short films. This actor, Canadian actor, I forgot his name, you've seen him once you see the film, portrays Glenn Gould into each of these performances. I have a compact disc of that, so that's sort of my introduction. I have a couple of, again, all my Glenn Gould is on compact disc, but watch that movie, Michael, and check it out, because it is really interesting. The only bad thing about a movie like that is I saw it in the theater, and if you're a little restless, you start thinking, okay, I'm at number 14, I got 16 to go. But if you get back that, you get your vaping, whatever you do, Michael, have a little cocktail, have water, whatever sit back and watch that. And it's an extremely enjoyable film and a great little sampler CD. I don't think it's on vinyl, but I wish it would be. It's great. 32 short films. I think it's 32. It could be 36, but I think it's 32.
Cool. What do you have, Mazzy, for us?
Okay, mine's a twofer, because you know how Mazzy cheats all the time. And I'm only doing that because of the cover. I'm going to Angel Records. Totally different artists. I'm going French and German here. So I'm going with Kurt Weill and Erik Satie. Erik Satie is very sort of late 19th century, early 20th century. I picked this partly, both these, because of the illustrations, the artwork on the cover. Kurt Weill is illustrated by a guy named George Gross, who was a famous German caricaturist. And I loved how the art director, these are from the 70s, I believe, used this on the cover of this series. So there's a whole series by different composers that are very similar style-wise in terms of the typeface and the illustration. What's great about this, the original cover, this original illustration, not as a triptych, but the singular version, this is a Picasso pencil drawing. And I just love this. Erik Satie, befriended at the time, in Debussy and Ravel later, and worked with them. I didn't really work with them, but was part of that whole thing. But again, I'm going to screw up the name, but Trois Gymnopédies. Anybody help me there?
Yeah.
That music. I just always say gymnopédie.
Okay.
I might be. I'm wrong. My French is not good.
If this is going to you on this grid here, what he said, what MJ says goes.
Absolutely.
That piece of music you've heard in commercials. It was used in feminine hygiene commercials. It's used in soundtracks. Woody Allen.
I am very sick of the Jeopardy.
It's one of those overplayed pieces of music. It's a gorgeous piece of music, but you know, there's certain classical pieces. Probably we had a joke in the 70s because there's an FM rock station, and the rock stations would start playing Pachelbel's Canon in D. And so there was a whole thing, you're a prisoner of Pachelbel, because you know, every person would come in and want a copy of Pachelbel's Canon in D. But I love this. It's kind of romantic. It's a little impressionistic. In terms of Kurt Weill, some classical people think he's too pop because he wrote Three Penny Opera with Bertolt Brecht, another, a writer, a novelist, a poet, and Three Penny Opera, you know, and that kind of music made famous things like Whiskey Song, known to most rock people as Alabama Song that the Doors did. A lot of people didn't know that that's not a Doors song, that's a Kurt Weill song. But and also Mac the Knife, if you know Mac the Knife, Kurt Weill, and obviously English lyrics written way later for the Bobby Darin version and beyond. But I'm throwing these in again, mainly because of the cover. Angel Classics, again, I got to know these because they were in the same bin, because Angels, remember that Schwann catalog, you'd have to have it by Schwann catalog number, not by Kurt Weill or Eric Satie. So that's my pick.
Are there UK EMI versions of those? Because Angel was the US subsidiary of EMI.
Right. You know, I don't know the answer to that, because obviously in the States we had Capitol Records, Angel Records, and they had, you know, EMI, Parlophone.
Because the Angel stuff just, the difference between the US Angels and the UK pressings is a world away.
Oh, the pressings were terrible in America at that time. I mean, Columbia, I mean, I don't want to, you know, pull things up from Michael in Germany, but knowing what we would get returns and things, you know, everyone would push them to DGG, Deutsche Grammophon. It was always $1 more list price than everything else. People wanted, you know, either the budget label. So those were like a $6.98 list. The Angels, Columbia Masterworks were $5.98 list, and then you got Nonsuch, Seraphin, all those were like $3.98 lists. And you know, you'd buy records at $1 off the list price. Then I don't get too technical, but someday maybe we'll do a conversation of retail records and selling records at the height of the record thing. But yeah, the pressings of these were atrocious. Deutsche Grammophon were great. Angels were RCA actually.
Well, it's because they didn't have I mean, the vinyl quality may be one thing, but it's because they didn't have the tapes in the U.S. So,
right.
Like Decca, London Decca, I mean, all the records were pressed in England. The Londons were pressed in England, just like the Deccas.
Right.
But the Angel stuff, they would send copy tapes over, EMI would send copy tapes over to the U.S., and I don't even know what kind of equipment setup they had, but it must have been terrible, because I've never listened to an Angel record that wasn't unbearable.
Yeah. I don't know about the mastering and that whole thing, and that's something someone else might be able to chime in on. I have no idea.
I was going to mention, Michael, in Germany, you might be interested in this, the minimal ambient world of music. There is a composer named Philip Korner who did a few pieces of Satie, and the release is called Satie Slowly, and he basically plays it at like a third of the normal tempo.
It's already slow.
I guess it's sort of, I mean, it's just a full gimmick, but it's pretty fun. It's like very meditative, like, you know, minimal drone almost music. It's kind of funny.
I think I showed 2 albums that the classical geek in our midst here hates, or that.
Well, no, I mean, the music is wonderful though. I mean, I think Kurt Weill is so special just because he's one of the few links we have to like the Weimar German culture. That was this huge artistic flourish in the 1920s in Germany that we just, like, a lot of people never made it out of.
Yeah, and he was influenced by Mahler and Stravinsky as well, too. You wouldn't really hear it in the music, but that's, you know, interesting stuff. Next.
Dusseldorf Man.
Okay, another Everest. One reason I put that one is, of course, because of the cover. Outstanding cover, I think. And it's choral Bori. It's
Hinastera, right?
Pardon?
It's Hinastera, right? This is Hinastera music.
Yeah, and it's a ballet and goes with the Aborigine culture. And what strikes me about, at least about this pressing, it's in classic record, and I've never heard in classical recording which such an outstanding dynamic. The dynamic of this recording is ridiculous. It's gorgeous.
It's because they were recorded, instead of being recorded on regular, like a half-inch tape or whatever, they were recorded on film stock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
And if you want to go into the dynamic capabilities of your hi-fi equipment, this is the one to go. It's outstanding. Really.
Is that the 45?
No, it's a 33.
That's the one I have.
Yeah, a relatively old one from classic records. It's not from Analogue productions. And I have to learn that you have to be a bit careful with the classic records releases of these Everest stuff. Some are outstanding, like this one, but some are not good. Not good. So be careful.
A lot of them are drilled off center. I've had a lot of classic records when the tone arm does this.
That is the case, and also simply not so good. The overall sound quality isn't that good, but this one is outstanding.
And I know the composer is John Entil, who's Australian. I'm not familiar with his work. Is this one of his most well-known productions here?
Pardon?
Is this one of his most well-known pieces? Or
I don't know how well known it is, but it's a gorgeous recording, and very 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 specific, very nice, and how can I put it? It's a little off. It's not what you expect from a classical recording. Okay, it's ballet music, but still very surprising, very, very nice listening. It's conducted by Eugene Goossens with the London Symphonic Orchestra, this version, and quite interesting.
That cover reminds me of exotica covers like Les Baxter, the face masks things, or Martin Denny, that whole, what people call bachelor pad lounge music, tiki music. It's very similar.
That's great. And you mentioned
that was my choice.
You mentioned that record also in one of your previous.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll need to go back and listen to that, because I have it and I haven't listened to it in like 2 years, and I should bring it back out.
Give it a listen and look or hear the dynamic. It's great.
Especially because my system's improved in that time, so
Gotta test it out.
Yeah.
What's next? What's next from you, MJ?
Okay. What should I do? I think I'll bring in something that I know that nobody here knows, unless you've watched my videos.
I do.
This is a Decca album. Well, it's actually a London. This is the third symphony of Albrecht Mignard, conducted by Ernst Ansermet Orchestra Suisse Romand. I mean, if you collect Decca records, everyone knows Ansermet and Suisse Romands, the orchestra he helped found. And he was like, most of the early rare Deccas are Ansermet recordings. This one's a little later. It's from '69. They marketed it as Ansermet Memorial Album because he died a couple years later. But Albrecht Mignard is, I think, one of the most underrated classical composers of the Romantic era. Not enough people really know who he is. His music is great if you like Bruckner, but he was a Frenchman, and so a lot of people call him the French Bruckner, because he kind of composed in that very like Wagnerian, Brucknerian style, but with a little bit of French Impressionism sprinkled in. And he's, I think, most well known because he's kind of a folk hero in France, because he died in World War I. And he didn't die fighting in the war. He died because one day he was at his home in the countryside and he saw German soldiers marching over the horizon. And he, in his bright idea, decided that he was going to shoot at them from his house. And so he did that, and then the German soldiers came to his house and burned it down with him inside it. And that was the end of Albrecht Mignard. But his third and fourth symphonies are, I think, are masterpieces. I've played some of his chamber music. He has a really great quintet for piano and winds that's wonderful and kind of an uncovered gem in the repertoire. And this Magnard symphonies, 3 and 4, they've only been recorded like 3 times. They're very much underplayed and underrecorded, but I suggest giving them a listen because they're very. You ever have music that you feel is kind of like cinematic, like you get landscapes when you listen to it? I do that with Magnard. It reminds me of like the scenes in Lord of the Rings almost.
How is the availability of this edition?
This record can be had, especially if you go for the London version. It's an edition 3, so it's still a wide band, but they're not the narrow band yet, but it's not a deep groove pressing. I think I got this for about $5. And if you want to get the Decca one, which has a much nicer cover, well, you're looking, if you're in America, maybe like $30. So it's not hard to find. It's not expensive. It's just underappreciated music that most people aren't familiar with.
So Michael can get it cheaper in Germany, probably.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Thanks for that tip on that one.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna do next. Let's see. This is János Starker.
Yeah.
The Dvorak, with Dorati composing LSO. This is the double 45 from Analogue Productions. I'm a sucker for cello, especially solo cello. So when I found the music of Starker, kind of fell in love. I kind of snoozed and I missed that the solo cello suites, the box set that was recently put out.
Is it not available anymore?
No, it's all out of stock everywhere.
Oh no.
Yeah. This is a really nice pressing. This is also available on 33. Yeah, here you go. This is what we're talking about. This is all. Yeah. Great. This is beautiful recording. Again, this is Starker was. I read a funny story about him that he was about to perform a solo concert, and he was a huge smoker, and he was about to go on stage, and the promoter or whoever was running the stage, said, you can't smoke back here. And he always had a ceremonial cigarette right before he went on, and he's like, F you, I'm not playing, and walked out, didn't play. But this is a really great recording and beautiful, beautiful pressing from Analogue Productions. I think a lot of his work has been pressed by Speaker's Corner, and of course this beautiful box set that also is pressed from Speaker's Corner, and then on 45 RPM from Analogue Productions. But beautiful cello music.
There's also, from the Bach edition, there is also an edition from Electro Recording Company. But Mazzy, you don't ask me where I have it.
It's kept under lock and key.
No.
I live with a cellist, so we listen to a lot of cello recordings here. And whenever we listen to Starker, he always comments. Starker's thing was he was just technically perfect. I mean, his technique on the fretboard is just so clean. So all of his music it is probably the best version technically of something you're going to see. Like his Bach stuff is just flawless. It's not the most musically inventive in the world, but it's just so relentlessly perfect and shiny.
Yeah,
and he has this huge sound. I mean, his tone production is just gigantic.
I think in that time or this time, it was all about technique, wasn't it? That's what they were going for, the technique to be perfect in a way. Not correct?
I don't know about that, because I mean, in general, the standard of technique, I think across classical music has risen. So actually, I'm more used to now, like as a modern performer, going back and listening to older recordings and being like, whoa, they got away with that. Like, whereas some of the stuff that is in those old recordings, they would never get away with in a modern recording. The standards of perfection are too high now.
Great. Mazzy, what's up?
In 1976, during one of my times working in record stores, we get the promo guys coming in, and of course everyone would clamor for whatever the hit of the day was, and I wasn't a classical wonk by any stretch of the imagination, but there were certain records that when he brought the box out, we try to grab things. Occasionally we can get doubles, but I got this copy, this promo piece, and I didn't know who George Crumb was. Boy, was I surprised, pleasantly surprised, but again, going back to the 2001 soundtrack, out there, almost like kind of, I don't want to, I want to say like the Captain Beefheart of, but it's not really like that at all. John Cage, the minimalist, avant-garde composer, still have this copy. This is a piano piece, 3 volumes of this record. This is volume 2. This is George Crumb, Macrocosmos, and it's Signs of the Zodiac. This is volume 2. I do not have volumes 1 or volumes 3, piano. And what's interesting about George Crumb, first of all, an illustrator, pretty popular illustrator of the 70s, Andy Engel, did the illustration. And I really kind of like that illustration. It almost looks cosmic. It is looking cosmic, but it's also the score of this. And of course, those of you who can read notation and read this will know what I'm talking about. Promo copy, Columbia Masterworks. Now, George Crumb, this piece of music is piano-based by Robert Miller on piano, but like people like John Cage too, you don't just play a piano with your hands on the keyboards. You use mallets on the strings. You kick it. You throw things at it. It's kind of like, again, I've talked to this on my channel. I'm a fan of conceptual artwork, of the Fluxus movement, Yoko Ono, and minimalist and avant-garde, and I just love the idea of this. This kind of music drives some people bonkers. I could put this on and people leave the room, which is great, because if you want to, end a party, you put this kind of shit on and people say, what the, I don't want to swear on this particular video. But it's out there. There's voices, there's doing weird kind of, you see where Yoko got her thing too, in a way. So I think it's kind of fabulous. And this has like Cancer, Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini. I'm not going to name the actual pieces of music, but each one represents the sign of the zodiac. So 1976, this came out, I suppose it's a 1974 or 5 recording. And I'm going with George Crumb, who's not everyone's cup of tea.
Do you know, is that, are those pieces for prepared piano?
Prepared in, what does that mean?
Oh, do you not know what that is? Because a lot of the strange sounds you're probably hearing on piano might be from a prepared piano.
Tuned a certain way or what?
So John Cage actually came up with this. So it's essentially you take a piano and you open up the lid, and to get certain sounds on certain strings, you'll do things like put a screw-in washer on 2 strings, or put laundry clips on one to mute it. And so you not just have a piano that has notes on it, but some of the notes make specific sounds.
I don't know the answer to that. It wouldn't surprise me by listening to some of it. What I do like, there's a note here, and it says, this is great. The piano sound in morning music has been modified considerably, and the listener should not think that the recording is defective in any way. That's subjective. I definitely answered that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I was going to bring in, but I didn't think the cover was great. The Columbia box set, which I also bought in the 70s, which is not like this, but of Harry Partch. I'm a fan of the composer who basically invented and built his own instruments. That's for another time, another place. But I love this kind of stuff. I want to learn more about it. I know I like it. And I'm kind of amused when I put it on and people hate it. Not that I'm trying to piss people off, but I expect it. And it's again, like conceptual art in the MoMA, you go there and you see something and people say, oh, I could have done that. What is that? They have no talent,
But you didn't.
But you didn't. Jackson Pollock, Splatter, you didn't do it. Yoko Ono, John Cage, 1 minute of silence. You didn't. But I love the concept of it sometimes. And sometimes the concept of it may be more important than the actual results.
So if you're into that kind of music, I recommend Märzbau.
Oh, I love Märzbau.
Jap
You
noise.
can't listen to this all the time, but at the right time, to me, this is lonely music because I don't know many people that I can sit and listen to it with. So
I like the collaboration records Merzbow does with different bands. Like, have you ever? So if you listen to Merzbow, have you heard his stuff with some of these like Western like metal bands?
No, I haven't. I just have a few Merzbow records, and honestly, that's enough. It's difficult
check out the stuff that Merzbow. He's done 2 records now with a American power violence band called Full of Hell, and it's fantastic.
I'm sure George Crumb influenced bands like Sonic Youth. You know, the whole noise thing. I mean, I don't study that. I like a lot of that stuff, but you know, the lineage is definitely there. God, we sound so smart here, don't we?
But I want to go just because it has something to do with Düsseldorf. Back to the prepared piano thing. There is a famous musician. He's called, and I think Michael in Texas knows him because he's a colleague. Quite a genre overlaps to his music. He's called Hauschka, and he does a lot of these prepared piano stuff. He has some records out on Deutsche Grammophon, and he's quite famous and a great guy, and he does this prepared piano stuff quite a lot. MJ, do you know Hauschka?
I don't. How do you spell it?
Hauschka.
No, I can't say I'm familiar with him.
Check him out. It's cool. He was originally on Fat Cat Records with Max Richter and Sugaros and Moom and all that.
Oh, okay.
But
he's on Deutsche Grammophon now?
I did something with a violinist. He did an album also with prepared piano. Yeah.
I'll see if it's on. I'll check it out on Tidal if it's on there.
Yeah,
it's probably there. Yeah.
Well, we played with him a few times, and he literally takes the lid off, and he has this like old doctor's bag full of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Felt and weaves the felt in between the strings. He puts like mini vibrators he got at a gas station bathroom, like all sorts of things, coins, little sacks of things, and like so there's like percussion, there's muting. It's pretty interesting. Michael in Dusseldorf, what is your record?
Okay. You mentioned him, MJ, Bruckner.
Yeah.
And I put this one out because this is a very, very special recording of his 7th symphony. And what's so special about this edition is that it is a direct-to-disc recording. And this makes it quite special. And I think what's also important to mention is that they used, I think, 5 microphones.
Yeah.
And I've never heard a vinyl that comes so near to the real listening experience within real symphonic orchestra. This is incredible. It comes incredible close to the live experience. And that makes this edition, in my opinion, very, very special. And I see MJ down there. He knows. I think you know something also about.
I have it. Yeah.
You have it.
Yeah. I wrote a formal review for it for the website I write for. And I think like a couple days later it actually sold out. I don't think I had anything to do with that, but it sold out quickly.
You can claim that. Come on. What is the website for those of you who are interested in?
Oh yeah, we can put a link down there. I write for a website called Audiophilia.com. I'm one of a few writers on that website that does it's vinyl reviews, music reviews, and equipment reviews.
So for this performance that was direct to vinyl, have you A/B'd it to similar sonically records that? Oh yeah,
there's in terms of sonics, there's no comparison. It's the definitive audiophile version of Bruckner's 7. I mean, the next best thing would be Carl Joachim's EMI, or sorry, not Carl Joachim's, Eugene Joachim's EMI set with Dresden Stockspiel.
For technical wants, is that one of those recordings that's multi-mic'd or is it single mic for the orchestra? Do you know?
Are you talking about the directed-disc set? Yeah, well, Michael just said it's 5 microphones.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed.
But they, I mean, you know how direct-to-disc works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, they cut it right there in the booth during a live performance, which is. It's a lot of pressure for the musicians because if there's one mistake, you got to you do it again? I mean, if there's a big mistake, I heard a couple little mistakes in there, but in the same way that you would hear in a live performance, which is actually, to me, it's part of the appeal of the direct-to-disc format, because I'm tired of hearing shiny, perfect performances that don't sound like the real thing.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because this also goes for audiophile recordings. And you know, there are so many people who look for tiny mistakes or warblings or whatever. And of course you find them. Vinyl is not perfect digital things. There are mistakes, and the same goes for those direct to disc editions. I can live perfectly with some minor mistakes when I have, on the other hand, this outstanding quality.
So for this actual recording, obviously they're limited by the side of the vinyl, the physical side of the cutting surface. Do they kind of do half of the movements and then take a break and then flip sides on the cutter head? Or
for this one, it was actually a 1.5 LPs. So they did the first movement on one side, the second movement on the other side, and then the third and fourth movement on the third side. And on the fourth side, they have the signatures of all the principal musicians in the orchestra, along with Bernard Haitink. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but this was Bernard Haitink's last set of performances with the Berlin Phil, because right after he retired.
This was like a year ago or something?
Yeah.
It's not, it's new, a relatively new one. They put out 1,884 pieces, because that was the year Bruckner composed this symphony. Beautiful edition, really beautiful edition.
And they did it, in my opinion, because I have the original, the Brahms Symphonies box set that they did a year ago, or 2 years ago now. And they got better. There were some sonic, the Brahms box set was great, but I had some criticisms of the sound. They did this one so much better.
Cool. All right, I think we're on our last round now. So one more record each. MJ.
Okay. This one is just one of, I pull this out so much because it's one of my favorite recordings ever of probably my favorite symphony ever. And this is Andrei Previn with the London Symphony Orchestra playing Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony. I played this piece. This was one of the first pieces when I was at MSN that I ever got to play principal on. And we played it with, oh God, we had the guest conductor. Do you guys know who Philippe Entremont is? He was a famous concert pianist. He did a lot of recordings with Bernstein and Eugene Ormandy on Columbia. He played like Saint-Saëns Second Concerto, brilliant pianist. He's too old to play piano now, so he fancies himself a conductor, and he's one of the worst conductors I've ever worked with. And he does it like, like half the time he'd just be shouting at us in French, and we had no idea what was going on.
I hope he doesn't look the vinyl community videos. Maybe
I don't care. No one's hiring him anymore.
Okay. We'll fund you.
But despite that, playing, this is probably one of the most fun things I've ever played. The music is just, I don't know if you guys have heard this symphony before. It's just gorgeous. It's, I think, Rachmaninoff's best work. It's so melodic. And it kind of takes you on an emotional roller coaster. And this recording, Previn, it was, when this recording came out, it's interesting because it's one of the first times they recorded the complete version with all the repeats. Normally they would do a shorter version. They would leave out repeats and they would take cuts in places. And this is one of the first times someone actually sat down and recorded the whole thing. And it's just, there's very few recordings that I think are so just monumentally important in the repertoire as this one. And the sound on EMI, this is the 70s EMI, the dog stamp label. And the sound is just fantastic. EMI is one of the few record labels, like, unlike RCA, which went downhill in the 70s, and Mercury went downhill, and even Decca went downhill a little bit compared to some of the stuff they were doing in the 50s and 60s in the golden age. I actually, in my opinion, I think the early EMIs are actually not great sonically, and the stuff they were doing in the 70s was the best stuff they ever did, in my opinion.
Mazzy, any notes on the cover there?
Hold that up again. Not really. Just it's kind of your standard sort of performance portrait.
Yeah.
No, nothing to say. Next.
Other than Andre Previn's extremely, I don't know, can I say Cosby sweater anymore? It's a very colorful sweater.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, my last one is very contemporary. This is a double 10-inch from an Icelandic composer named Kjartan Sveinsson. I don't know exactly how to say it. And Michael in Germany will have to help me here. De Klang der Offenbarung des Göttlichen, which means...
Not bad, not
Yeah,
bad.
that sounded convincing.
Which
Der Klang der Offenbarung des Göttlichen.
Which is the explosive sonics of divinity, roughly.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it fits. Yeah, you can say that. Great.
So, Kjartan is known for being the keyboardist from the famous Icelandic band Sigur Rós. This was his first solo production. This is a 4-part opera that premiered at the Volksbühne in Berlin. And this is a double 10-inch. The jacket is larger than a 10-inch, and it's so thick that good luck getting the vinyl back in there. So but this is so beautiful. For those into like the neoclassical Johann Johansson, Max Richter, like that kind of world, this is right up your alley. There is operatic singing in it. Be forewarned, but the instrumentation is beautiful, and this was pressed on a label called Bel Air Glamour, which I've never heard of, but very rigid, thick pressing, full color gatefold. I think it might still be available. This came out, I think 4 or 5 years ago, but it's really beautiful for like a very contemporary kind of neoclassical connection.
Beautiful. I love the black and white cover. Reminds me sort of Ingmar Bergman like film.
Yeah.
Can you show me a close up of the back? Like it just pops some color. I couldn't quite. Is that an illustration or?
Yeah, they're all paintings.
Wow.
You know what that cover reminds me of? You might know this, Michael. Do you ever listen to The Deer Hunter?
I'm familiar with them, but not really.
Oh, they're not Deer Hunter like the animal, but like deer like addressing. Yeah, their album covers have those kind of like forest paintings like that on them. Reminds me of that.
Gorgeous.
And especially if you're into the Sigur Rós music.
Oh right, of course.
This guy. Anyway, yeah, I think he's done a couple other film scores since this, but this was the first thing he did on his own. Highly recommended. Mazzy, last choice.
My last one is kind of a personal record for me. Non-such record, the Kronos Quartet. Kronos Quartet. Again, Michael in Austin talked about how you're a fan of string quartets. Big fan here. Again, it always goes back to the Beatles for me. 2 pieces of music. George Martin's original score. He did string arrangements for Eleanor Rigby. And what he did with the cellos in, I Am the Walrus and Strawberry Fields, to me, are just magnificent, and it got me turned on to this. I'll talk about the cover in a minute, but this is 1988 recording, and they cover like 8 different artists. Winter Was Hard is Ossilis Stalanen, who I don't know, but of course there's a piece by Terry Riley. There's a piece by Arvo Pärt, Anton Webern, of course, a John Zorn. So it's really a potpourri of modernists. John Lurie, who was a member of, an actor and a member of the Lounge Lizards, the jazz thing, who was in Stranger Than Paradise, the Jim Jarmusch films, but really kind of that whole Lower East Side New York avant-garde jazz scene of the 80s mainly. Astor Piazzolla, Argentinian, not accordion. What do you call the?
Ben DeLore.
I was corrected because I knew it was, and I said I love Astor Piazzolla a lot. Alfred Schmidtke, Adagio, of course, famous piece.
Do you mean Schnicke?
Yes.
I love Schnicke's great. I love Schnicke. I played
Quartet number 3, a Samuel Barber Adagio, of course, and they close a traditional piece called "A Door Is Ajar." Now, the cover thing is really important to me because a couple things. The cellist, I mean the violist, Joan Genrenaud, who's no longer with them for health reasons, was with them for 25 years. She is the godmother of my son. My photographer that I represent, Michel Clement, took the cover of these. The concept of the cover is supposed to be like Russian constructivism photographs of, you know, the turn of the century 20s and things. The designer, I was at this photo shoot in the late 80s. The designer who designed this cover is a guy named John Kosh, a British record cover designer who I was in awe of because he goes by the name of Kosh. He designed the covers of Abbey Road for the Beatles, Let It Be for the Beatles, all the Linda Ronstadt records in the 70s. A great designer, but I just think this cover is so beautiful, so stark black and white, and even the detailed covers of the shadows and everything. So
Amazing.
I love this. I love Kronos Quartet, modernist, minimalist. You know, they're still together to this day. They tour the world like 300 days of the year. I think they've gone through 3 other cellists since Joni had to leave because of her health situation. But she's done some great things on her own too. But one of my favorite albums that I just literally got, I was going to show, but it's from 3 years ago called Landfall that they did with Laurie Anderson, a composition based on Hurricane Sandy. And it's just a great minimalist, intimate, wonderful, shocking piece of music. So,
Probably one of the most famous pieces based on a hurricane.
pardon me?
It's just making.
I got it. Okay, yeah, the most famous hurricane. Yeah, except for Louisiana, 1927 by Randy Newman, written way before Katrina. But when Katrina happened, it really came out. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. You got to bring some pop music references in there. But if you ever get a chance to see Kronos, whatever they do, a lot of stuff's multi-image. Michel Clement, the photographer who did this, did all their photography from the late 80s into the early 90s, kind of their image, because they were one of the first of the classical quartets that had this sort of image-based thing too, almost as if they were a rock band. You know, they were heavily styled and everything and dramatic, not over the top, but it was a very part of their thing. You know, you'd up to this point, you'd see the 4 classical quartets and they'd be sitting in their chairs, you know, kind of nerdy looking like the 4 of us here. But they were like literally like a rock band, and out of San Francisco, and it's just an amazing international outfit.
That's a very interesting point to bring up, kind of changing the face of how they marketed themselves.
Well, and again, they got picked up by Nonsuch. They did a couple independent records before, or smaller label. They did a great thing of the music of Bill Evans before that. So they really merged into the genres, not just classical specifically. And they do pretty much stay away from the traditional. I mean, they got around this time some airplay because they did a kind of interesting cover of Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. So that got some airplay.
I need to find that. That looks cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the tail end of, you know, when CDs were coming up. So you can still get this pretty cheaply.
Is it my turn? My last turn?
You're it. Okay. And we've got a winner.
Yeah, someone's. I'll get it later.
At the very end, can you hang out for a minute and pick your iconic cover that will show well, and let's hold it up for a thumbnail each. So.
Okay.
Okay. I close the circle with my last one. I showed in the beginning. I showed. Vivaldi, 4 Seasons, and now I finished with Bolero.
Again, I think I have to get this. They're knocking again.
Okay, again, and it's so popular up to now, and I understand why, because when you're in the half of this one of Bolero, you think it can't get any better, but it gets better and better and better and better, more. and this makes this recording so special. And if you haven't heard that one, really highly recommend it. It's gorgeous listening. It's very emotional, and this living stereo is a beautiful recording, and still a very good availability. You can get it in your record stores. Beautiful pressing of an outstanding composition, I think.
And that great RCA living stereo type again, color, just really graphic. And that sells you. Of course, the photograph is kind of interesting too, but that multicolored type, so early 60s.
But Mazzy, I think the photograph is a little outdated, isn't it? It's very 70s.
What was that, 1962 or 60?
Something like
that. It's early 60s. That's a great I have both the original shaded dog of that and the new Analogue productions, and they're both great. I mean,
it's 1956.
Oh well. You know,
so they recorded that before they could put it out on stereo. Because RCA did stereo recordings as early as 1954, I think. I think the first one they did was like Pines of Rome, but they didn't have stereo records until 58.
There's Respighi or
Respighi,
excuse me. See,
sorry, I was making faces in the background because the doorbell was actually the new speakers that I'm set to install. So
wow, amazing. And for those of you who are maybe just getting into the vinyl world of classical, Analogue Productions has the RCA Living Stereo remastered.
It's a great place to start.
Yeah, and I was going to say that Munch is how you say it, the conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. He is one that they were heavily repressed, as well as the Reiner with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Or there's a lot of titles that all sound great.
Yeah, and the stuff that, especially the stuff that Munch did of French repertoire. I mean, Munch was a Frenchman, and he that was very much where he was at home. And while he was the conductor of the Boston Symphony, that orchestra really became known for their interpretations of French Impressionist music.
Amazing. Well, we have a lot to study and research and listen to, I think.
I hope so.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll do some more of these, and let's
grab and there'll be links below.
Oh, do I have to pick one now?
Pick one that works graphically on the screen, please. Hold it closer, Michael. Not close. Okay, I feel like a photographer now. Give me a little sugar. MJ, tilt it. Yeah,
it's the window. Yeah,
little in towards you. Come on, give me some sugar, baby. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I have to say something. MJ, you showed me tonight how far away I am from saying I know something about classical music. Thank you very much.
Well,
I think people should know they don't be afraid of it. I mean, I just jumped into it.
Right. Just go into it. Try it.
And don't be afraid to go. We didn't show a lot of Vivaldi and we didn't even show Beethoven. There's a lot of if you like that stuff, start with it. Don't start with art with Crumb, definitely.
Well, I think there's something for everyone in classical music, because classical music incorporates so many different things from so many different time periods. I mean, for me, I've always, from an early age, I've always been fascinated with history. I'm very much someone that likes to read about history and kind of understand what life was like for different people at different times. So for me, classical music is a window into that. So I'm always relating to classical via history and how it sits in the context of what was going on at the time. So that's just, that's how I talk about music, and that's how I come to appreciate music, I think. But everyone approaches it from different ways, because I know so many of my colleagues don't think about music like that.
Right, whatever works for you. Listen to the music. Just be
right.
Be inspired. That's it.
I second that.
Hey, thanks. Links and descriptions below. See you next time, guys.
All right, take care. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
this has been fun.